Hello, and welcome to another edition of Museum Minute. My name is Curtis Gosser. I'm the curator of exhibits here at the Hastings Museum, and today I want to talk to you about a famous cattle rancher here in Nebraska who was also kind of a sketchy dude. In the late 1800s, when Nebraska was being homesteaded, cattle ranching was a big business in the western part of the state. Now, Adams County really wasn't part of the open range, as you would call it, but we were right on the edge of cattle country. Now, when it comes to cattle ranching, you need a lot of land. And as homesteaders began to buy more and more claims, the open space for ranchers began to disappear. Now, when ranchers would want to move their livestock from one piece of land to another, or to greener pastures, they would take the shortest route, which often led them directly through settlers' property. Ranchers felt that it was their right to be able to use this land, that it was open for all. But homesteaders had a much different idea, and they began to put up fences to keep the cattle out. And this caused some very harsh relationships between ranchers and homesteaders. Now, one of the largest ranching operations in Nebraska was that of Esom Prince's Olive, or Print Olive as he is more commonly known. And in 1876, after basically being run out of Texas, he moved his family up here to Nebraska to Plum Creek, which is now known as Lexington. And with him came his brother Bob, who was his ranch foreman. Now, rumor has it that everywhere that the Olives went, a trail of bodies was sure to follow. And Bob was actually running away from Wyoming. And he was leaving Wyoming because he was wanted for murder. So you can tell we already kind of have a colorful cast of characters. Print Olive was the head of this ranch that was being established, and he was the self-appointed cattle king. Not the Tiger King, but the cattle king. But it is all equally as dramatic. Now, the Olives kind of made up their own laws and forced many settlers who had families, homes, and crops to leave their homesteads. After all, this was unorganized territory, and the law was very difficult to administer, and these cattlemen took advantage of that situation. Now, two homesteaders who were not scared of the Olives were Luther Mitchell and Whit Ketchum. These men had both suffered a loss of crop at one time or another due to olive cattle. And the Olive family believed that these two men were the leaders of a group of settlers who were stealing, butchering, and selling olive cattle in towns like Kearney, Grand Island, and Hastings. The animosity between these two families went on for years, until one day Bob Olive was at market in Kearney where he saw olive cattle being sold. The man who was running the sale claimed that he bought these cattle from Ketchum and Mitchell. With proof of the theft, and I say proof in air quotes because it was very thin, Bob went to the sheriff in Kearney, and the sheriff in Kearney deputized him. Now remember, this is a man who is a known murderer who is being deputized. Well, with an arrest warrant in hand, Bob goes out to the Ketchum farm and demands that the two men surrender. Now, the reports are conflicting on who fired the first shot, but after a barrage of bullets, Bob is dropped with a single shot from a rifle. He's alive, but barely, and after a couple of days, he dies. Now, understandably, his brother Print goes blind with rage, going around offering everyone he sees a $700 reward for these two men, which comes to about $15,000 in today's money. Fearing Olive, not the law, but fearing Olive, Ketchum and Mitchell turn themselves in to the local sheriff. And the local sheriff, being such a stand-up guy, actually turns the two men over to Print Olive so he can enact his own justice. Well, Print loads the two men into a wagon and hauls them out to Devil's Canyon. He pulls them up underneath a tree, he strings them up to the tree, he douses them in flammable liquid, and while they're still alive and hanging from the tree, he sets them on fire. And then just kind of for a nice cherry on top, he shoots the two men, just to make sure they're dead if they weren't already. So Print Olive would stand trial for these murders, and this is where Hastings comes into play. The trial was held here in town at Liberal Hall. The local courthouse was much too small for all the spectators that wanted to witness this trial, so they had to find a bigger venue. And fun fact for all the adults out there, Liberal Hall once stood on the corner of 3rd and St. Joe. And does anybody know what is standing at the corner of 3rd and St. Joe today? Well, that would be the Olive Saloon, named after Print Olive. Feelings on both sides of this court case actually ran so high that the state militia had to come in to Hastings and stay for the length of the trial. Print had some of the best lawyers in the state defending him, a luxury that would eventually cost him a little over $5 million in today's money. Rumor also had it that Print's men approached every witness and juror associated with the case and offered them two options, either a fistful of cash or the loss of their tongues if they didn't take the money. Well, even with all of the best lawyers and all of the bribes, Print was sentenced to life in prison. However, on appeal, the Supreme Court actually overturned his case because of technical irregularities. And after 19 months in prison, Print was released. However, this is not the end of our story. After he was released from prison, Print Olive traveled out to Colorado, and he was there for a few years. While there, Print decided to confront a cowboy in a bar. Now, it's speculated that this cowboy may have been related to Ketchum, but it's really kind of unsure. But in this bar, he was approaching this man about some money that was owed to him. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen any westerns, but it's usually not a very good idea to approach a cowboy about some money. Well, needless to say, the cowboy laughed in Print's face when he asked him for money, and this made Print furious, so he drew his gun. But the cowboy was quicker. Print Olive died at 4:30 p.m. on August 16th of 1886. The local sentiment was that Print lived by the gun and died by the gun. Now, before I let you all go, we have one artifact that I want to show you. So here in our cowboy case, we have a branding iron from the Olive Ranch. And it's this one hanging down here that is either an L or a 7. We're not quite sure which it is. So thank you all for joining me for this Museum Minute. As always, for more digital resources and online content, go to hastingsmuseum.org.